We did a rather complete drawing to get the light and dark values of this painting together, and I followed the lead of one of my students, and I made a Xerox copy of it, from which I was able to use a pen to mark from the graphite transfer paper. So I'm going to be keeping this where I can see it because this is a really important thing of what we're going to be doing. So as I'm painting this face, I'm going to be painting the shadows. I want to paint the light and dark areas, but the shadows are really what help make the form visible. So, you know, seeing this shadow around this eye, seeing this shadow on this part of the cheek, seeing the shape of this shadow as it runs down through the face. These are all very important. And this bounce light that comes in and lightens up this side of the face just a little bit. This beautiful bright light here, and then the darker background back behind it. Shadows running through some other places, but the shadows are what tell us how the planes of the face change, and so it gives it that three-dimensional look. So no matter what form that I want to use, what way I want to approach this, the shadows are what I'm going to be looking for. And hopefully before the end of the 6 weeks, I'll be able to do another painting using a little bit different painting technique. But this one, I attended the watercolor live, and there was a painter who was using a very careful, layered method by just using the three primary colors. And I thought I would at least start in that direction. I'm probably not going to do it in as many layers as she did, but that whole idea that I'm going to be coming in with shadow, the cool shadow side of the face first, letting that dry, and then coming back and putting a warmer wash over it and finding some of the yellows, finding some of the pinks in there. But I'm going to start with blue. So this young lady is going to be blue, the blue lady. One portrait that I did that was really quite successful and I was really quite happy with, I did do this, but I started with a purple rather than a blue, and I'm actually thinking that maybe to hurry this up a little tiny bit, rather than straight cobalt blue, Aurelian yellow, quinacridone gold. And then before we finish, we're going to be adding burnt sienna into the mixture. But those are going to be my four basic colors that I'm going to use in this painting. So I'm going to take a little bit of the quinacridone rose and add it to my blue here, just to make it into a bluish purple. And let me add a little more blue because that might have been too much. A bluish purple. Okay. So, Scary Berry, let's get started. I'm going to have to move this so I can see it a little bit better. The hair is dark, so I can come in and I can have blue on her hair and this whole side of her face. So we're looking for shadow areas. And yes, it's going to be pink later, but for right now, it can be blue. And I need to be thinking about what's happening as it joins. I'm working on dry paper with a big brush. What happens on this dry paper as we get grades across her forehead here. And then she has darker hair. Darker hair comes across, where was my line? All the way down to there. And then her hair has some highlights over in this other side, so I don't want to take this blue the whole way. And right at this, I want to make that soft at the, and actually that can come all the way across like that, because there is a darkness that runs across through her forehead there. So just put a tiny bit of color in there. And I see one spot where I got blue that I don't want, which is right there. That's really quite light. Okay. And yeah, you know, I can put blue all the way across that eye. It's going to have the, there's one little highlight in there, which I can pull out later by dropping in a little bit of pure white pigment. That. So I can go ahead and have blue all the way across that eye for now to keep this reminding me that, and that's darker there, a little darker right up in here, and at the back end of her eye there. So I'm just looking for shadows, and the bridge of her nose, it's got to soften it here at the bridge of the nose, so I've got to soften that line just a little bit. Careful how dark we make that, Margaret. It's going to pull up into there. So a little darkness underneath and then come to that lip. The circles across there. There's a lightness that I'm going to pick back off of there. There we go. I can come in and make things even darker. I just got to be a little careful. And then this comes over a little bit. There we go. And this is darker back in here on that cheek. And yes, that comes darker there. Underneath of that lip. And I'm going to have to soften some of this once I get it down. And under here, and then find its way down her neck to this necklace. Soften these edges because I don't want those hard. Soften that edge, even soften this in here. And there's a little bit of blue, a little bit of dark that comes in underneath of there. Shadows under these pearls. And this area of her skin down here is not as bright white as up there, so I actually can have just a hint of blue. And this part of her skin actually feels cool down there. It feels like it needs a hint of blue in it. And neck moves down. So this is really watching, concentrating, thinking as I put this down in here. And yeah, I'm going to just do a little tiny lift there. Little tiny lift there, and then a little lift on this back side of that face there. Now that's starting to get some shape to it. Okay. And then let's just go ahead and get this blue put right down into her clothes. It's going to be more of a blue-green by the time it's done. It lightens as it comes down into here. So I've taped my page into an 11 by 14. So I actually have a little place to play with color down here. And let me just put some blue down there for playing later, because I want to see what happens when I put other colors in on top of it in various different thicknesses. That's dark around the back side of that guy. Let's just pull this down. Try and keep that, fairly consistent light and water content in here so that the water doesn't push things away too much, so I can control more what those spaces are like. And the other side of this. Now, yeah, there's a shadow in there, so I don't have to worry about falling off of this a little bit. This has got more highlight in it, so let's keep this blue a little bit lighter. We're not going to have that strap in there. I think she had a purse or something over her shoulder. I don't see that as being important to the story. And then let's bring that right up next to those pearls. There actually, yeah, let's find those little shadow sides of them with my brush. I can see that we've got a little thing happening. And she had a highlight in her hair up here. Is that already dry? Just a little damp brush on there. Got to be careful with that to not overdo that. And I'm going to just come in and lift some of that water off of there to keep it from running and pushing any further. And then the one other place, and I think I'm going to move to a little bit smaller brush for this other eye. We're just about out of cobalt blue, but I don't need a lot on this other side. I want to be careful about coming in here too heavy. So this, finding this space around the eye, and comes up onto there. Soften these edges, soften that edge, don't get it too far. And we can put some blue into her iris. Get it right across that pupil. I want to soften this edge just a wee tiny bit, because I want her skin to be fairly soft and gentle looking. And if I don't do some of these soft edges, that's going to be a hard line next to her nose. If I don't do soft edges now, it's going to look too harsh. Soft edge, soft edge. And that comes up just a wee touch into there. This comes under her eye just a little tiny bit. And, okay. Have I made her quite scary? Quite scary. Okay. I'm not going to do it, but the background, I'll do it in a whole different thing, but it too could have blue underneath of it, and more blue over here than over there. I'm sort of liking that color that's back there. It's sort of a green-gray. I'll have to see. We want something that's going to go nicely with her jacket. It might be we want to shift that more into a purpley tone. We'll see. So this is where I'm going to stop for now. I want to just do one more thing. I'm hoping I can soften this nose just a wee tiny bit more, and then come back in with that rag. And this little spot right here. I either had to wait until this was completely dry to do this or now, but coming in with that rag is pretty important. And this is soft here as well at the bottom of that. Okay. And maybe we need to lift, maybe I need to wait and do this later. Okay. There's a little inequity there, but I'm not going to worry about it. That's going to be a fairly dark area. Same with this stuff going on right here. It's going to be a fairly dark area. I'm not going to worry about it too much. And maybe I'll just come in with this rag and see if we can lift a little of that water off just a touch. Sometimes just keeping it from being as wet will keep it from running and making big blossoms. So we stop at this point, let it dry completely, and then I'll come back in and we'll be working yellows and reds on top of there. The disadvantage of doing this method is that it's going to look pretty awful for a little bit. The colors just won't be what we are going to have in the end, but it's going to build up, and we're going to slowly build these into the colors that we want. And I have one thing though, that this little dark area here is going to show through, so I want to lift this just a little bit to make that a little bit more even color there, so that we don't end up with a dark spot that we don't want later on. And I think that's the only one that's going to be really bad. There's a dark spot down here too, and it's not quite so crucial. And yeah, let's just, this one on the shoulder, let's take that one out too. And anything else? Oh, this highlight that was in her hair, it's actually easier for me to do this now. I probably shouldn't have even tried earlier. And There's a few other little bits there. Okay. It's okay that that's dark there. It's okay we got a little bit of blue there. I'm pretty happy with maybe soften this edge right there. Easier to do these now when it's dry than to try and do anything later. So I always try and do any of these little corrections that I need to early on. Oh, and I know one other place that when I was doing it, I was talking that I was going to need to, and there's actually a highlight on the bottom of her nose down here. So let's just go ahead and get that pulled out now. Cobalt blue is relatively easy to lift. And, ooh, soften this hard edge right there. If I was doing a fellow with more rugged looking skin, I would leave some of these sharp edges because they would add to the ruggedness of his look. And this actually can be blue on this side over here as well. Okay, now, do I do yellow next or do I do red next? I'm thinking I'm going to do yellow because I want to get a feeling of the glow, of the light coming through her skin. And yellow is going to give that to me. Which one of these brushes is a little better? One of my brushes got a bad hair day going, and yeah, I think it was this other one, and then I have a hard time controlling the tip of it. So now I'm not going to necessarily paint everything. I'm going to paint where I want the, so let's bring this over here to look at this. There's a warmth to the front of the face here that happens with this yellow and down in through here. And so I think that's where I want to get the yellow put in. But there is a feeling of yellow over there too. So I suppose it's going to sort of grade across the face a little bit. Should I be working with my even bigger brush? Always a decision. Biggest brush you can handle, work with the biggest brush you can handle. But now I have to be very careful about overdoing this because although I want that warmth, I don't want it dark. And I want just barely a hint of yellow on there for most of that area. Just a hint. And then in these darker areas, it can go a little bit darker, but maybe not quite that dark. I have it mixed relatively thick, and so I've got to be very careful. So we're going to just go ahead and put it right up into her hair here, and this little light space there in her hair where she's got a curl. And at this point, if I go off the line, it doesn't really matter because that's going to be background back there. So let me just not worry about being fastidious. So very thin and pale through these light areas. And her nose, I want to leave some of that white. So it's just down in here, and then some whiteness right at the very top of that. And same with her eye. We want some whiteness in there. So let's leave that alone. But these darker places can go darker with the yellow as well. So it's all going to look sort of green at this point, but remember we're coming back with red in on top of here. And then in the end, we'll be coming back with some burnt sienna to get some of the brown colors. It's always amazing when you start looking at a face how many colors are there. And just very, very pale. So don't freak out on this. And this side of her pearls can be picking up a little of her skin tone, and that side of her pearls. And I just want that soft. And then her jacket I do like the fact that it's sort of a green-gray, so we'll go ahead and pop some yellow down there too. And this pearl, let that just come off of her face, off into that background a little bit there. One of the advantages of sort of pulling this into the background at this point is that that's going to help merge this to the background and make her feel like she's an integral part of that background. And so as I'm doing this, do we want to give a little more accent to her jacket, leaving a few places a little lighter? And letting some of that blue show through. And it's starting to bleed there, and I'm liking that. And I like this little uneven thing that's been happening in the background there. And this side of her jacket. A little more sunny feel to that. Scary Berry. I'll tell you, I've been a little bit nervous about starting this demonstration because I know this person pretty well. She's my niece, and it's like, I don't want to blow her look. But the other advantage of knowing somebody fairly well is that you have an idea of what they should be looking like. Okay. I think that is the point when we are going to stop. This is going to go much darker over here. No, I don't want it bleeding into there. I want to keep that nice and crisp on the edge. So no, I'm not going to paint anything in there right now. This is going to stop at this point, except for right here. Mm-hmm. We can stop here. I think so. I think we can stop here. Put darker yellow in underneath of there. Her neck is white. Okay. Okay, got to stop, let that dry completely, and then we're going to come back in with a layer of red, and then we're going to start adjusting colors and building it up to the final color that we want. But this gives us that feeling of what the dark and light part of the face is. Now I'm getting a little bit of glow of yellow light on here, and then we'll start building the skin tones after we've done that. Okay, Scary Berry. We're now going to put a pink layer on, and this will start bringing the skin tone up to what it's going to be. But there's a lot more darkness that's going to go in this dark side. But at this point, I'm just sort of bringing up mid-tones, but still trying to maintain where things are a little bit darker and where things are a little bit lighter. And one of the things that I'm noticing here is that I maybe got this a little bit dark right here. So I can just do a little tiny lift here so that her neck, where it joins that jacket, stands out a little bit more. And just to keep reminding myself that these areas are lighter. We may go darker with them again eventually, but at least it keeps reminding me what needs to be done. Okay, and I want to get this value study out where I can see it a little bit better. And her face, I've got down here really pretty close and trying to keep it at about the same angle as the painting. So, red. Once again, we don't want to go too dark with this red. Let's see, I need to make a bit more of it than I've got. I think I'm not going to have enough there. So this, with doing these layers, it's really easy to maybe get things too dark. And let's just look at this on top of there. Yeah, maybe about that dark. I'm gonna just, I still have a little bit of water in my brush, and yeah, let's come in with it just really thin like that. Bring it on up into this hair, and once again, it can leave the space. It's okay if it goes back there, because I'm gonna put more stuff back in that background. And I want to work this around the shape of her face. So it curves down, finds its way across here. Very highlight there. I'm not going to put any pink into that area. That's going to just have that little hint of yellow in there. Start bringing this across and down around her face. Don't like that hard line up there. Let's soften that. Get that just working its way up into that background. And I want this as a very soft edge, so let me come back in with water here again, soften that down. And these colors in here, we want them pretty, I'm actually picking up a little bit of the color underneath as I move that around. I don't want to do too much of it, or if I'm going to get really muddy and dirty looking. Now, around her eyes, this can come in quite a bit darker. Not quite that dark though. It looks a little too dark. But I can just take that paint and move it around. And this time I'm going to come right up into that eyelid, and this corner of the eye is reddish as well. Just a little thin amount up onto here, and then that eyebrow. So as I'm doing my brush marks, I'm thinking about the shape of her face and how the light and dark is. And so it's a little lighter right up in here, so I want to lift a little bit to allow that to stay a little lighter. And it's a little lighter as it comes off of here, but it's darker right next to her eye right there. So let's just let there be a little bit of Scary Berry pink there. You know, I'm notorious for showing you guys things that I haven't done very much of. So if this comes out awful, blame me. Just want to be careful that I don't get this too dark. It's easy to get just too much. I just want a little lightness to this. There we go. And then come down. I can find that. Come down onto those lips. You know, and in some places this might end up being the finished color, and other places we'll be doing quite a bit more work with it. This comes down into a little thing there. Okay, let's continue working my way down before we get hard lines where I don't want them. Her hair is pretty dark, so this can go darker up in here because we're going to put more dark on top of that. Let's see. Be careful about getting too much, Margaret. And I've got to keep working this so that the paint is smooth on there. I'm starting to see ins and outs happening because I have a thicker and thinner paint, and we don't want that. I want to keep this really pretty smooth because she's got pretty smooth skin. Okay. I'm taking a little bit of paint off my brush, drawing the brush a little bit just so that I can control this a little bit more. And on down her And I'm not going to put this, maybe I will put some on that jacket. I was going to say I wasn't going to put it on the jacket, but I think I will because in the shadow areas of the jacket only, because there is a little bit of purplish feeling to that shadow area. Okay, go back and grab this before it gets icky. And oh, I've got that piece underneath of her chin. I've got to get that grabbed before it gets icky. Rinse my brush, dry my brush, lift a little off, take and move this around a little bit. Hint of pink without going crazy with it. Hint of pink underneath of there, just a wee tiny touch. Little touch there, little touch coming off of her mouth. And yeah, there's an interesting little piece right there. Don't let those be big spots. Dry my brush so that I'm not introducing water, I'm just moving paint away. Okay, and now under the pearls, this part of the jacket I don't want to put any on. And oh, there's a little hint of this color that comes up and onto those pearls. Let's bring this all the way down in here. Thin that a little bit, bring it over into that shadow area and that shadow area. And then this can come up onto that jacket on the shadowy side. And even here a little bit. Very pale of her, on her neck, that's darker than, but this still needs a little pink down into here. And I have a mark here I don't like. Let me see if I can lift it from the blue layer. And we've got something happening here that's a little too strong. Let's lift this back a little bit. It's very important at this point for you to be constantly checking your source material to make sure that what you're doing is the right thing. Okay. And remember, Margaret, you had to leave this very white right here. This is a very light white area. Come in with my rag, lift that off. Oh yeah, that's better. Okay. And that's probably fine. That's there. Okay. And let's get that pink out of that part of the eye and soften where it comes in here. Get that rag on there, soften that out. And it can have a little tiny bit of pink in this far side over here too. And actually those eyes are going to go pretty dark. Let's just take that right up and onto her iris. This mouth is going to go darker here, so let's just go ahead and get this on here. That shape. All right. Now, into this eye. My darkest pink is up here on this eyelid, and then it's going to soften out from there. So I'll just grab it from there and pull it up into that eyelid. And then this side of that eye is pinkish, and it's pinkish all the way through there. And then it comes out halfway out here, pulls down into that. There's a little bit of darkness on that eye pocket, the sort of the skin below the eye. And some of that doesn't feel quite right. And soften this, soften all that. I'm not going to put any of this pink into the iris on this side. It's actually going to get a little yellow and burnt sienna and a greenish tone in there. We'll soften that just a wee touch. There's something, yeah, okay, we need to do just a wee tiny bit there. Ooh, don't let her see it at this point. So, am I going to be able to rescue this? I don't know. I hope so. Let's see, we were going to put a little bit more of the pink down into the shadow areas on her jacket here. So let me just do that right now. I'm just hoping I haven't gotten this too strong in here to start with. But there will be more colors on top of there, which will then be dominant over what I just did. I'm going to have to let that dry. When it dries, I'm going to do just a little bit of lifting in there to sort of smooth that skin out. But that's going to go quite a bit darker. We get our value card on here. The darkness back in there is going to be up to about value 2. Well, we are nowhere near dark. So yeah, it's going to go much, much darker. So a lot of these colors will be hidden underneath of there when I go to build those darker layers in there. But this gives us that roadmap of where the light and dark patterns are. So hopefully when we finish this, it will end up being a very pretty painting. And so we're being hopeful. Always hopeful. Faces are sometimes a hit and miss matter, but my original drawing came out good, so we have chances. I just don't want to rush this too much. I almost feel like I've rushed it too much already, but before I leave this for a week when I'm going to get back to it again, there's a couple of things in this undercoat that I just want to lift. I'm feeling like I got a little out of control, and it's going to probably leave marks all the way through. And so I just wanted to sort of even out a few things. I already did a lift through here because she's actually got a lightness through the top of her cheek here that we don't want to lose. And I'll just do a little tiny bit more of it, take my rag to it. I'm not taking all of that paint off, I'm just smoothing it out some so that it's a little more accurate feeling for where the light and dark pieces should be. And then she's quite dark right underneath of her eye, but not when she gets into that cheek. And so I want to take that off a little bit. And then I want to soften this edge. Some of this painting is going to be close to being done. I may not do a lot more in here. I really like what's happened with that sort of pink and purple. It probably needs a little bit more, but not a huge amount more. There's a little hard spot right there that I don't really like. And then there's this unevenness on her nose here that is not accurate. So let me just pick that up. We'll be doing some more darkening and changing as I go. This is nowhere near dark enough on this side. And quite often when it's dark like that, I wouldn't worry about it too much, but I'm just a little concerned that some of this is going to show through. And then when it does, it's going to look mottled, which we don't want it to look mottled. So just doing a little sort of lifting and smoothing of that paint gently with my brush. And same with down here. There's a lightness that runs through, and when that dark goes on there, it's going to be much better. Not to worry about it too much. Oh, and I know one of the other things was this right here. Needed to move over just a little bit. That feels a little better. And she's got a lightness on her lip right in here that we don't want to lose. And this lip here, let me just lighten it a little bit because that's going to stay pretty light all the way to the end. Okay. When I start back in on it again, we'll start working on those eyes. The eyes, of course, are driving us crazy because they're not done yet and they're too light. This light is way too light in that amount of darkness, but it's going to go even darker. So we've got a lot of movement to do with those eyes and that whole eye area before this is done. But we've got some nice lights coming through here now. Oh, and this little dark place in her throat. This was the other place that needed just a little smoothing out. It was just a little too dark in that one spot. Okay. All right, I think that's all that I needed to do. Maybe this right here on her jacket. Bring that light area up a little further out on that jacket. Yeah, that feels a little better, doesn't it? And then we were pretty light there. Just soften the edge of this pink, which is coming up into that fold of her jacket, and we don't want a hard edge there, we want a soft edge, so we'll just soften that edge. And her jacket, you know, I'm just going to lighten the edge of this just a wee touch to remind myself where it's light. Okay, I'm feeling a little bit better about that now. A little lighter right underneath of her nose right there. It's a beautiful little light that comes through there. And underneath of the nostril here is a little bit lighter. Okay. All right, time to stop on that. Oh, I know, there is one more spot. There is one more spot, and that's this one right here. We don't want that pink to come over that far. This light on the side of her nose is really quite beautiful, and this here too needs to be a little lighter up toward the top. I think that's gentle enough, delicate enough. There'll be other darkness that that's going to come in there that's going to define some of that later. Okay, so this is now where I can feel comfortable about leaving it for a week before we get into it again. Here's one more. One more. Yeah, it's sort of have to make these decisions. Are you going to leave some of the hard lines and just let them be part of the design, or are you going to come in and soften this? And I guess I'm softening. Okay, that's better.